Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Tuesday, July 14th. This is your daily Buckeye Fix. I'm Tom Orr, and today I'm joined by Tony Gerdeman, the lead beat writer for Buckeye Scoop. The story today, as in everywhere in college football, is the likelihood of a 2020 college football season. That has been a major topic of conversation nationally since last week. Monday, Tony released an update on the latest on Ohio State. Tony, what are you hearing about the Buckeyes potentially resuming their summer workouts?
Yeah, from what I was told, it sounds like that might happen on Wednesday. Some testing early this week, and as long as everything comes back clear, then they'll be back at it on Wednesday. And this is the week where the mandatory workouts were set to begin for the NCAA is given permission to do these 11 days of strength and conditioning before the 2 weeks of spring practice, quote unquote spring practice. So they should get back to it here this week. I know that is the hope of everyone as we begin this daily or day-to-day process back towards the possibility of maybe college football.
And the schedule with the mandatory workouts this week, that is set up to coincide time out with what was originally week one, which was Saturday, September 5th. There has been talk about potentially moving that schedule up, potentially starting sooner. But right now, there's just everything is just kind of like one big shrug emoji. Like, when will they start? Who will they play? Will they move it up? Will they move it back? Will they space games out? Nobody quite knows yet. We will see when they do have some more information. One of the things that we do know for sure, the Big Ten is not playing any non-conference games this year. It seems like there's still not a lot of clarity on what this 2020 schedule could end up looking like. There's been a lot of talk about like a 9-game schedule. Gene Smith talked about potentially moving it up to a 10-game schedule. But then you wrote about another Big Ten athletic director who's talking about even more than that. Can you share sort of what he's talking about?
Yeah, Nebraska athletic director Bill Moose on Friday, I believe, said he wants 12 conference games. And to me, that's, as we're talking about the pessimism of college football happening, 12 seems very optimistic. And I don't, when the Big Ten is talking about and Gene Smith is talking about wanting flexibility, 12 games kind of makes things a little too rigid. If we want things to be flexible and to have the opportunity to move some things around, I understand that Nebraska wants 6 home games. I get that, and everybody wants 6 home games this year. But that's, if you can get 5, be happy with 5. I'd say if you can get 4, be happy with 4. Be happy with whatever you get this year. 6 home games and 12 games total in the regular season, just conference play. It's nice to think about, but I wonder how many athletic directors are in agreement with that when the focus on going to conference play was so much more about the flexibility. And then to then go to 12 games, well, what did we scrap the non-conference for if we want flexibility? Now we've just taken it away from ourselves.
Right. And the idea of flexibility is if you have a bunch of built-in off weeks in the middle of the schedule, if someone tests positive, it gives you, maybe they're missing one less game if you've got a built-in bye week every 2 to 3 weeks. But also, if potentially 2 teams test positive, 2 other teams who they might have been scheduled to play might be able to sort of reshuffle their schedules and play someone else if those 2 teams aren't available. So again, I think everyone has probably figured out this is going to be a college football season unlike anything we've seen in the past. And so maybe, that's probably not going to happen on 24 hours notice. All of a sudden you're getting on a plane to fly somewhere else. But, if you have a week notice or something like that, maybe it's something like that. But there's just a lot of uncertainty right now. And the questions go beyond the regular season. I mean, it seems like there's still not a lot of clarity on the Big Ten title game, the bowl games, playoff games. Like what do you know about those at this point, if anything?
Well, the Big Ten will be talking about their postseason this week. What kind of championship game? And I'm going to assume let's assume they keep the divisions as they are, because you've had so many athletic directors talking about wanting the division games to be closer to the start of the season. So we'll assume the divisions remain the same. But yeah, this week they'll talking to Gene Smith last week. He wasn't interested in any postseason talk at that point. It was all about let's get the regular season go. That was their focus. That that week of meetings. This week, now they'll talk a little bit about it along with the rest of the scheduling. But I mean, it's normally the first week of December. Could they push it, to the second week or third week? Probably. I just think everybody needs to realize things are going to be fluid as they've been with everything else in our lives since March.
Well, I mean, you mentioned the Big Ten championship game normally being the first week of December. Normally, the week before that, Ohio State's playing Michigan. If they're moving all the division games up in the schedule, the Ohio State Michigan game could happen in September or October. Which, boy, will that! I think the Earth may wobble on its axis if the Ohio State has to play Michigan in September. But the irony there is the first time Ohio State and Michigan played to end the season, it was because of the influenza pandemic about 100 years ago. They sort of had to reschedule their whole season, move a bunch of games around because they had some stuff that was canceled in October. And lo and behold, Ohio State played Michigan to close the season for the first time. That was just a little over 100 years ago due to a pandemic. And here we are. It might the streak of Ohio State playing Michigan to end the season could end because of a pandemic as well.
Hey, Tom, and it might start a brand new streak of always opening the season with Michigan. Maybe the next 100 years will be the season opener. Doesn't that sound great?
Oh, man, that will everyone talks about wanting a return to normalcy. I would guess that most Ohio State fans would really love to have the Michigan game go back to the end of the season. If it does in fact move this year, I think we're making assumptions, and as 2020 has proven, those all definitely happen exactly the way you think they're going to. When do you think we'll know more about at least a regular season schedule for the Big Ten? Gene Smith seemed like he was expecting something this week. Is that still, as far as you know, the timetable?
Yeah, I think they're planning to put it together this week. Then when will they tell us? Maybe late this week, this weekend, maybe a week from today or so. Like sometime early next week, I would think we would know for sure. But again, knowing for sure what the future schedule is just means we know what they're thinking right now. What that schedule might be in a month or 2 months, then just leave some room on that schedule for some shifting and some movement. But I believe we'll know within the next, say, 7 to 8 days what the schedule looks like. And I would not be surprised if Michigan is in September at that point. Maybe not the first couple of weeks, to leave in some movement, but it's starting to feel that way.
Well, Ohio State and Michigan playing in like 85 degrees and sunshine is going to feel so wrong. You also got some insight into what the media situation could be for the fall at Ohio Stadium. And, I recognize that's not something that everyone necessarily cares about as much as we do personally, but it actually, in reading what you had shared about it, it seemed like maybe it was kind of a little bit instructive about what the thinking is overall right now, in terms of potentially carrying over to fans as well. So what can you share about what they're expecting in terms of the Ohio State media situation?
Yeah, at Ohio State and the sports information departments are all talking throughout the Big Ten about what they're doing. And right now it looks like the capacity in the press box at Ohio State will be maybe a third of what it normally is. There's 225 seats in there now, so that'll get cut down to maybe 75 or so. And you've got OSU staffers who occupy some of those seats. You'll have road media. You'll have obviously the OSU media, the opposing team's SID department, however many that will bring in. Don't know about the NFL scouts yet, and I've had some scouts who have talked to me saying, just let us sit in the stands and we'll be fine. We don't need the press box. But again, then what do they count towards the attendance out in the stands? Because that is also going to be very regimented. Now, if there are no fans, then sure, let the scouts go ahead and sit out there. But if there are fans, then they're going to have to be. That's all going to be CDC guidelines and social distancing and all of that. But then the post-game interviews will probably all be virtual, Zoom-type meetings where reporters will send in their questions after the game, and then rather than everybody, I think everybody has probably been on a Zoom meeting now where half the people have left their microphone, been left on mute, half haven't, and there's just bunch of communication issues there. They'll just take questions and then read them from the reporters. And so basically, you'll go to the press box and you'll stay there until you're done with writing your story and don't necessarily move from there. There may be some food to buy, but there will not be any probably food provided. So we're all going to have to make sacrifices this year, Tom.
A brave new world indeed. I mean, this has certainly been something of a roller coaster year in terms of going from the uncertainty of the spring to, at least I personally feel like it felt like at the beginning of June, like, well, of course college football is going to be back. Everything is trending in a great direction right now. It should be fine. And then now we're back, 6 weeks later, back to uncertainty again. What is your sense right now? Give me a likelihood that we're watching at least one Ohio State football game this
fall. From talking to people and over the past week, there's so much pessimism and concern. Gene Smith said he's no longer cautiously optimistic. But one game, if we can get to that point, then maybe the first game, and then we'll see how it goes from there. But I think if you can just get to that point, getting to that point will be huge. And we talked about the NCAA's chief medical officer, I think, on Buckeye Weekly in the past, and he's saying that some of the key dates would be like July 13th, which would be today. In terms of if we get there and can get workouts going, that's something to keep in mind. I think you just keep going to these as each mile marker is hit, as each spot is made. Then it's just you wonder, will panic ensue at some point? Does it take an entire conference to shut down before everybody shuts down, or will other conferences operate without other conferences? Well, I would really like to talk to some optimistic people so I can become optimistic once again, So, one game, I don't know. 50-50 for me right now. It's terrible.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking for optimism, I think the main source of optimism right now is that everyone in college athletics knows they really need a football season at some point to pay the bills, because otherwise things get pretty ugly pretty fast. And you're talking about, bridge loans or something like that, which is something they obviously don't want to probably get into. So, and once they start a season, they're going to be real strongly incentivized to get through as much of it as possible and not play 1 week and shut down, because then, you're putting a spring season at risk if you start a fall season and don't finish it. So, I think once everyone is incentivized to get something done and get a season in, and once that season starts, they're going to be incentivized to play as much of it as they can. So I think that passes for optimism right now. That's right. That's more optimistic than you've heard from a lot of people.
There are just as many reasons to play the season, I would say, as there are reasons not to. And sure, some of those reasons are weighted differently, but there are an awful lot of reasons to try to get the season, for sure.
Well, Tony, thank you for joining us. If you want to hear more about the 2020 college football season and our optimism or, optimism type substance for the 2020 college football season, Tony and I also do the Buckeye Weekly podcast that he mentioned earlier. We put out 2 to 3 episodes of that every week. We have another episode dropping today, and there will be another one on Thursday where we're previewing some of the position groups for Ohio State this fall and going through some of our listeners' bold predictions for the fall. So that should be much more football-y than this was. Probably a little bit more of a fun listen. So apologize for the tone of this morning's podcast, but it is what it is. We work with the source material we have. You can find Buckeye Weekly and all of the great podcasts from the Buckeye Scoop podcast network on Apple, Google, Spotify, and any other podcast platform you'd like. Just search for Buckeye Scoop to find all of our great shows there. You make sure you subscribe and also leave us a rating and review. We greatly appreciate all of that. Thank you guys for listening, and we will talk to you tomorrow.